It hit me today. Every monster. That means all of them. Look how far we've gotten so far. Page 22 out of 352. That's only 6%. And we've only completed the A's. Okay, calm down. Surely there's no monster that starts with Q. That should save us some time, right? Wait. There is a Q monster. Will this monstrous onslaught ever end?
But why would we want it to end? This series has been tons of fun so far and has only increased my love of painting minis. So welcome to the series where we print and paint every single monster from the D&D Monster Manual, including the single Q monster. Let's get started with the first of the Bs, the Banshee.
So here's the model I chose. This one is from Arbiter Minis, and it is actually supportless. I'm obsessed with these supportless models. They make cleanup infinitely easier. I mean, you don't have to remove supports. There is no cleanup other than washing and curing. This model came out beautiful without having to worry about anything. I'm always in awe of a designer who can make a supportless model, but still make them look good. Yeah, I really like this model from Arbiter.
Now we're actually not sponsored by them. We're actually not sponsored at all. So if you're enjoying the video, subscribe. It helps us out a ton.
So for the paint job on this one, I took a pretty different approach to how Banshees are typically depicted. Banshees are ghastly creatures, so there's usually lots of grays and whites, very little color. I completely ignored that, because I was inspired by comics of old. You see, back in the 60s and 70s, comic printing technology was somewhat limited. It was easier to print very vibrant colors than it was to print duller colors. It just looked better and was more consistent. So a lot of heroes were given pretty bright colors. Reds and blues were most common. Spider-Man, Captain America, Superman, Daredevil. So when it came to the villains, artists wanted something that would contrast well with the heroes. So a lot of villains were given purple and green color schemes. These colors are complementary, which means they are opposite to each other on the color wheel. So that's why a bunch of villains wear these colors. I mean, it's everywhere. Kang, Riddler, Annihilus, Lizard, Lex Luthor, the Skrulls, Mysterio, Green Goblin, Brainiac, Joker. My favorite comic book character of all time, Hawkeye, is primarily purple because he first appeared as a villain. So I thought it would be fun to make my Banshee paint scheme an homage to some of my favorite comic book characters. A bright two-tone complementary purple and green. Just like the eye-catching 60s comic book covers popped on comic book stands, my Banshee will pop on a table full of terrain and minis. And you know what? While that color scheme is completely different from what is normally depicted for the Banshee, I think that's okay. It's my paint job, it's my mini, it really doesn't matter how lore accurate it is.
Now if you've never learned your ABCs, this series is a great place to start. Subscribe so you can see what letter comes after B.
But speaking of the lore, let's talk about it a little bit. So the Banshee originally comes from Irish folklore. There, it is a female spirit who sings haunting songs when someone has died or is about to die. Not to be confused with the Greek siren, which is the monster that appears in the Odyssey and manipulates men with her voice. They are somewhat similar, both being scary women who sing haunting songs, and it can get even more complicated when you throw the harpy in, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it in the H's. Now the Banshee and Siren have different origins in Irish and Greek mythology respectively, and while the Siren intends to kill, the Banshee offers more of a warning. In 5e though, the Banshee does intend to kill. It has an ability it can use once per day called Wail. Every creature within 30 feet has to make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw or drop to 0 hit points. And even if you do save, you still take 3d6 damage. Pretty strong for a CR4 monster, and very annoying for the players. I guess at least it's only once per day. So in the world of D&D, a Banshee is, quote, a spiteful creature formed from the spirit of a female elf, unquote. They are cursed with overwhelming beauty, but they fail to use that beauty for the betterment of the world. So they slowly wither away until they are creepy, effed up, undead abominations. One interesting thing about the Banshee is they are bound to the location of their death. They can never leave a 5-mile radius. And they also hate the presence of any living creature. So they live in a small location completely isolated from any living thing. Banshees are creatures of vanity. They hate what they've become. Even a mirror is too much of a reminder of who they are. Actually, a mirror might be a pretty effective weapon against them. But I like the idea that the more attractive members of the party are also more hated by the Banshee. Of course, that might get real weird real quick. A Banshee would also be a cool creature for the group to find handouts about. Maybe the party finds old journal entries from before it became undead and have to piece together a way to defeat it through that. As for my paint job, I decided to keep it pretty simple. I didn't use any washes or dry brushing except for the hair and base. And those are typically my go-tos. Instead, I just progressively highlighted lighter and lighter. I'm not brave enough to attempt much blending yet, so this ended up with a pretty graphic look, which I'm pretty happy with. One nice thing about not using any washes is it's easier to go back in with the darkest color to fix mistakes. And the model also just looks a lot brighter, much more like those comic book characters I was aiming for. I was really feeling this model, and time began to pass in a haze, and by the end of my painting day, I had a finished model. So let's take a look at the Banshee. While the colors are completely different from what it is described as in the book, I'm still really happy with how this model turned out. So lore-accurate colors, be damned. I think this is really going to pop nicely on my table. So with that, we've cracked the bees. Up next, Sean is going to paint the basilisk. Subscribe so you don't miss that. Thanks for watching.